Sorry, just making sure. Oh, I will share. Everyone can see my browser, hopefully. So yep, so this is just basically a mostly informal, a little bit formal, I guess, catch up with just the epic we have underway, which I'm working through to basically reorder the pipeline. So hopefully everyone who's not just started should be pretty aware of the decision that was made a while ago that we need to basically reorder the pipeline, the auto deploy pipeline for gitlab.com to more or less just accommodate some of the new testing scenarios that QA want to do, in particular this kind of the mixed environment kind of testing, or the problems we've been having with like mixed deployments, I guess. So the epic that I'm working from. There's a few epics floating around related to this, which doesn't help, which makes things a little confusing. But the epic I'm working on is how are we actually, from our side of things, actually going to implement this and do it. To give you a kind of brief update on where things are at. So I will just try and find the epic itself. Perfect. Just move this up here. Apologize. So after talking to Alessio and kind of looking at the best way to approach this, I've kind of broken this down into a few different kind of stages of how of kind of work or goals or milestones that we need to achieve. These aren't by any means concrete. They're still kind of subject to change, especially stage 3 and 4. And I think that's possibly what we'll discuss a little bit today. But stages 1 and 2 are relatively straightforward and simple. So what we need to do is we need to make staging Canary. Basically, the first thing we need to do is to make staging Canary as full of an environment as possible, as big and full, and actually even more full than current production Canary, because there's things that production Canary don't currently have. So basically what we're trying to make staging Canary is as close to production as possible, not necessarily as close to Canary as possible. And in fact, off the back of this work, there's possibly a little bit we could do there to make production Canary better now. Like in particular, I don't think we have a production Canary for GitLab pages, or maybe, actually, I think we do. Yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway, if there's any bits missing, hopefully after this, we could probably do a little bit of cleanup and make sure that Canary production and Canary staging and production are more or less as complete as each other. They're just obviously different sizes. So that's kind of the first stage. I've been working through that at the moment. Pierre set up staging Canary, and most of the work got done that. And he did, for someone who's relatively new to infrastructure, he did a really good job. And the only pieces he focused on there were the Kubernetes deployment pieces, which is, a huge part of what is in Canary. So that's great. So in order to close that gap, the first thing I kind of did was just look at the pieces that we're missing. And the big 3 were Gitlab, Prefect, and GitLab pages. So Skarbek, with his work on the pages migration, I believe has set up a GitLab pages in staging Canary. So that's complete, or I do need to circle back and make sure that is complete. But at least we've got some work happening there. I've been focusing this week on Prefect and Gitlab, and I believe I have them ready now. The only thing is left is to actually wire them into, I've got an MR up, and basically that's to wire them in so they're actually getting deployed to. The VMs are there, the VMs are running. Once I get that MR up and I can see that they're getting deployed to as part of the normal pipeline, basically that's more or less what I would consider stage 1 complete. The second stage would be to actually get testing on top of staging Canary now, and testing in a way that happens only against staging Canary. So where it's not doing mixed mode, we'll be doing mixed mode testing as well. So there's kind of 2 sets of testing. And Alessio, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. We want to do a set of testing that's obviously quite full, but is just targeting staging Canary. And the reason is, if we start to look at this, I do apologize for these diagrams. I wish there was a better system for doing diagrams as code, but So going to let me display it. Perfect. So this is a little bit hard to read, but essentially the big piece here is when we have the coordinated pipelines kicking off deployer. At the moment for staging Canary, all it simply does is basically runs the migrations, the deploy, and we're going to add in a new, I guess, QA task. And essentially that's going to have the devil's in the details there, I guess, on how we actually are going to do it, like whether we do the pipelines at the same time in terms of the test suites for the mixed mode testing and the full testing, or one after the other. I was hoping for QA's input on that step when we get to that, which is obviously very soon. But essentially that's really what we're trying to get. So this first two stages, if you'll notice, are not rearranging the overall pipeline. It's just to get staging Canary ready and just to get some kind of testing on it. We could probably even do the allowing to fail for the staging Canary tests to begin with, but honestly, we could probably just still block on them. I mean, they should be, we're going to be trying to push these tests to be as concrete as possible. So we probably won't, we will block if they fail. But once we have that in place so that we know staging Canary is good, and then that staging Canary is getting the right tests and a good amount of testing that we're all satisfactory with, then we can kind of go to the next stage. Before I jump into that, has anyone got questions, comments, thoughts, anything else that I'd like to add on those first pieces?
Yeah, I want to just double down on this thing. That is the reason why we are shifting those testing at the Canary staging level, and the reason why we want a full Canary staging level environment is that what we want to gain from this is that running Canary staging QA, a complete Canary staging QA with a cookie set in order to fix all the traffic only on the Canary environment will give us more or less the same amount of confidence that we have today after running a QA after staging. Because we have a full environment which consists of all the applications that we run. We have cookies that are fixing the target of our testing to only the new staging Canary, so only the new version of the software. So the end result is the same, barring post-deployment migration, but that's a detail of these things. They will be removed in any case. So that's the reason why we say the same amount of say safety that we have today. So basically the point is that in production, Canary is designed to reduce the blasting radius of new changes. Here we are flipping the point of view in reverse. We want to have basically all of our traffic, not all, just 95%, for instance, of staging traffic to get routed to Canary, so that Canary is not reducing the blasting radius, but is amplifying it.
Absolutely.
That's the point.
In hindsight, maybe staging Canary is not even the best name for the environment, but it's fine. It's too late to
we had to come to an agreement on this because renaming stuff was on the table, and not everyone liked it. So we said just keep the same names. That gives the idea we are just changing the routing and the purpose.
So I
have one question before we go on. How is it working with Gitlab? Because setting a cookie, I think, wouldn't be enough to fix tests to Gitlab on the right node or something, right? Or do we have a solution for that?
I think this is part of stage 2. So basically, when we set those tests for real, namespace are routed to a specific Gitlab or prefect node. So we need to make sure that the namespace that is running QA is bound to a prefect storage. So sorry, not prefect, to a Canary storage.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And so stage 2 of that, let's get the tests in place. So I'm just getting the infrastructure up and running. And so I'm kind of at the end of that. I'm getting close to the end of that, but the next stage is definitely, we need to get testing on this, and we need to validate that we're testing the right infrastructure. And so the 3 big pieces are Gitlab prefect and Gitlab pages, actually. So I do have an issue open in the Epic. is specifically to discuss how we can do QA testing for, like Canary testing for GitLab pages, because the problem we have with GitLab pages is the pages itself terminate SSL. So we can't do like cookie-based routing or anything like that. The best we can do, we don't do it yet in HA proxy, but we could wire this up for the staging environment, is to use SNI inspection. So looking at what the domain is on the SSL request, like the TLS connection, and HA proxy does allow us to route to the backend based off that. So it can say, I'm connecting to host, whatever.staging.gitlab.io. So HA proxy has that information and then therefore could route to, say, a Canary pages node or not. But what that means is, and I'm hoping we can do this with the QA test setup, is we can say, create a new namespace. So let's say, pages QA, like staging.gitlab.com/pages QA, and therefore the GitLab pages domain for that should be stagingqa.staging.gitlab.io or whatever the pages domain is. Then we have to wire in the HA proxy configuration to say, if you get a, oh man, maybe this isn't possible because the pass-through is TCP.
But do we have at the moment QA for pages? Because I don't think we have.
I am unsure, and this is probably what we. So we need to kind of, pages is an unknown, I'll freely admit, and so that's something I do want to kind of figure out.
Yeah,
what is possible and what isn't.
Yeah, I don't think we will be able to do testing on custom domains unless it's our own custom domain. So we can say this is the staging Canary QA test namespace. So we configure 1.2 project in there with a custom domain that we control. So we can do instead of doing a TCP level proxy, we can do an HTTP level proxy because we can provide the same certificate to both HA proxy and and internally to the EFS. So we can basically we do HTTPS proxying over an HTTPS connection. But I'm quite sure we don't have QA for that.
Yeah. And then idea for pages move from TCP to HTTPS and provide just making notes, sorry. Yeah, it will really depend on how far we want to go with this, right? Like what tests we want to do, how much we think it's reasonable. So I guess, yeah, so I've got a tracking issue for that. And sorry, I'll pull this up to the top level. Whoops, wrong. Yeah, so I've got a tracking issue for that. Yeah, to basically look at GStage CLY pages. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, for Gitlab and prefix, it's pretty well understood. We just do that whole, like we have to force a certain namespace onto those nodes, but then we should just be, because I think we do that in gprod Canary already.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
This is what we're doing.
Okay, so this is kind of the easy part of this, or mostly easier and at least hopefully well understood. The next stage of it, where things start getting interesting, is stage 3. So post-deployment migrations. So if we take a look at what pipeline looks like at the moment, thank you. We'll see that in deployer, not in the Canary stages, but when deployer pipeline runs, it does the pre-migrations, which are fine. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we need to be touching where pre-deployment migrations happen. Those are all working fine as is. We have to deploy. Oh, sorry, I'll try and make this bigger, a little bit bigger. That should help. And then we have these post-deploy migrations, and then we have QA. And the important thing to note is the post-deploy migrations and the QA happen right after deploy, and they're in that one pipeline for deployer. So that's where it happens for G stage. And then for gprod, once again, you have migrations, deploy. There's no QA in production, or someone could correct me. Maybe that's right. There's no
QA in production.
Yep.
No QA
because
production.
we've gone through all the things. Canary has QA, and then once it hits production,
I don't know. Maybe we have on a schedule, but maybe it's something that quality is handling, but it's not part of the deployment.
Sure. So then we have, once again, post-deploy migrations, and we finish. And this is in the deployer pipeline that happen. It's very bound tightly at the moment to the deployment, right? We deploy, post-migrate straight away. The proposal, or what we're trying to get to, and I really wish I actually found the epic, which you did, Alessio, where you went through all the options, and when we've had the option that we actually discovered, the option we've chosen for the final pipeline, what the final pipeline is going to look like. But essentially what we want to have to do is we're going to have to pull post-deploy migrations out from being in those spots. They can't be bound tightly to when we deploy anymore. And that's when the first we start changing our deployer and our coordinated pipeline. And that's where things, start to become more sensitive to us, especially trying to keep auto deploys ticking along.
Yeah, the epic is one that Myra linked in in point one of his point.
Perfect.
I think is
So
the link below. No, the link below. The point
that's it.
Options
Perfect.
we have so far. That one. So basically, we agreed of
so I'll find the
abstracting away those. I don't know if there's diagrams here, but basically this is the working item for the decision. She pointed out some of the options, but basically we are going to remove post-deployment migration from our regular deployment. They will just be run on demand by release managers. That's the intermediate end goal. This is good.
Okay.
Intermediate end goal. So because in the end, very long end goal is to just categorize and understand which type of data migration or migration in general we are using, figuring out what is backward compatible and then can be part of the pipeline, of the deployment pipeline, and what is not. And then can we get rid of it? Can we move it as part of the product? So it's not no longer a deployment problem, but it's something like you have an admin interface when you see there is a pending maintenance operation that your instance needs to run. And then you have control over there, like how many are running, failures, and things like that. So this is a very, very long-term goal. But in the meantime, we're just going to the couple the thing, right? So that's why we're discussing about, as part of this reordering, we are just also moving the post-deployment migration.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
In terms of the details of this, is that what we were discussing last time, Graves and I, was this, that right now our deployments are quite atomic, in the sense that you trigger something and that something just lock the environment, go through everything is needed up until QA, if it's part of that pipeline or not, and then unlock the environment. And so inside this thing, we have stages, so we make sure that things are deployed in the right order. So the problem here is that post-deployment and QA are baked into this, things that we want to extract away. And there is a dependency, there's an order dependency when we do Gitlab prefect fleet. That's the thing. Obviously, they are part of the fleet. When I say fleet, I mean everything else. So all the rates application and pages as well. So right now, the fleet stage is almost empty because we trigger Kate's workload and we do pages. Pages is going to be part of Kate's workload. I don't know if it's already merged, or basically we are almost there, which means that the fleet stage can be moved at the release tools level. Hamad, I don't know how much you can follow me on this because it's very specific on how we do, but consider that we have a top level, which is release tools that is orchestrating stuff. And one of this sub element is the deployer. which was born to deploy VMs. And now we are moving away with this top level overview when we tag and follow everything from just the release tools, which is the thing that we control as a team. So, and we are still in this mixed environment where part of it is in deployer, part of it is in release tools. So point is that if we end up as part of this or as part of what Myra is doing with a single pipeline epic, because these two epics we're just working on both of them. So we're just working on the same items. We may end up having a situation like this where we trigger a deployer pipeline that just locks the environment and do everything up until prefect included, and then just returns the control to release tools. Then release tools can trigger Kate's workload, which basically does the complete fleet, and then trigger, actually I would say unlock the environment and trigger QA. So basically we want to have this, the final step of the deployer we want to be able to trigger them as a separate trigger from the beginning. So you kind of have start the deployment, give me control when I am on the fleet level. I do the fleet, I do QA, I do whatever I need, and then I can tell the deployer deployment is ready to complete, and so you can just unlock the environment, do tracking and things like that. Most of these things that I'm mentioning as completing the deployment are supposed to be moved in any case to release tools, but we are still in this mixed situation. So that's where we are at. And as part of this, we will have this natural ability to remove post-deployment migrations and just have a trigger that only runs post-deployment migration for a given environment, which is the goal that we have to move them at the end. And then as part of what Myra is working on, just not having them at the end, but just having a separate trigger or separate schedule or separate something that only runs post-deployment migration.
So that all makes sense to me. I guess I'm just trying to understand what we should be doing first, I guess. So it sounds like Myra wants to get it to a point where, it's just a chat ops command. It's literally just whenever someone wants, they can just run auto deploy. It's not even we don't even consider it part of the auto deploy pipeline, really. It's just something at some point someone can trigger and we'll figure out the rules around that. And that's fine. That makes sense to me. It's really a question of, can we do that now? Is that too hard? Should we be doing something? I've put this as a proposal for the next step for this work, to just move post-deploy migrations from being in deployer up to release tools, even if release tools is just running deployer, which I believe is what Myra is probably proposing as option 2.
Option 1.
Oh, okay. Well, I was thinking,
option 2. You're right. Option 2.
Yeah. So I was thinking, at least for this epic, is that the first step we can do? We just move it out up into release tools, and then because we've got to weave them in and out, because we've got to run post-deploy migrations on staging at the same time we're deploying to production, I believe, or we're going to try and coordinate them somewhere around that point. I'm happy. So that was what I was thinking as the first step, but
it is. Sorry, go ahead. No.
But if it really depends on when this work's happening. If Myra's going to do the full work to just pull the thing straight away, if that's happening soon, we can kind of just wait for that. But I guess it really comes down to what's the
She's timing. Pulling out QA right now, which is one of the other problems. I don't think we are going to remove post-deployment migration.
Okay, fine.
Soon, maybe at the end of the quarter. I don't even know if we ended up putting this in the OKR. I have to double check. But the point is that we should consider something like this: pipeline reordering and extraction of single task are happening now. So, and we are prioritizing single task extraction to make sure that this pipeline reordering can just happen. So we Myra is working on QA right now because I think it's at the end. But basically, we are depending on who is ready. Some will pick up the removal of the post-deployment migration, and once post-deployment migration are an atomic entity that we can just trigger, we will move at the end of this pipeline as part of what we are discussing here. And later on, probably next quarter, we will remove that piece that triggers into a ChatOps command or something.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, gotcha.
So once is a single entity we can trigger, then we can move it around where we need it.
Okay. So in that case, I think if I'm understanding things correctly, at least from an immediate standpoint for this epic, I think this stage 3, as I've defined it, makes sense. Well, maybe not how I've defined it, but we agree that we don't want post-deploy migrations to be in that deployer pipeline as it currently stands. We want it to be out by itself in some way we can actually interleave it within the tasks a bit more. So Myra and Alessio, you've put some options there. So option 1 is to build an independent pipeline for post-migration. So that, I believe, is like starting part of this larger work to actually pull it out, like this whole independent pipeline that's run by something different. I'm obviously not against that, but it just sounds like that might be, the amount of work involved with that might be higher. Alternative 2, which is what we've kind of talked about, which is where it's currently in deployer, we keep it in deployer. We just change the GitLab CI so that it's in deployer. It's not running all the time. And then we just make release tools run deploy again with just this one task. So it's kind of like we're splitting it and make release tool call deployer an extra time just to split it off by itself. And at least if we do that to start with, like just not changing the order, we're just splitting them. So at least we have it and we know it's working, deploy is still deploying it. Then we can actually at the top level, at release tools level, start shifting it for like staging and production or whatever. As we need to rearrange the pipeline, we then, because release tools is the coordinated pipeline. That's the only pipeline we can really try to control those things.
As part of this, we have to figure out what is in the finalization part of the deployer pipeline that needs to be moved or triggered independently.
Yep.
So, for instance, Slack notification, they are already moved up in release tools. I'm not sure if they are still in both or we are kind of testing the implementation yet. But this is, for instance, release locking and unlocking is another thing that we need to have control over. Release tracking is something that Myra, I think, has selected as probably second item to work on after, because release tracking is really weird. So release tools triggers deployer triggers release tools, because release tools is the component that is in release tracking. So because in the beginning it was different, right? So we're just moving one piece at a time, but we have to just spend some time to figure out what we need to
makes sense,
take care of. Consider if move or just say I want to trigger everything else and just continue, which is an option.
So I think the 3 things then, if I'm understanding correctly, the 3 things then at the end of, so this is kind of this is a work in progress. So this is kind of like I'm thinking, right? So coordinated deploy. Let me look at staging, for example. Deploy is G stage. You have this deployer pipeline that just does pre-migrations and deploy. It then goes back to the coordinated pipeline, which does a G stage post-deploy migrations task, which is calling deployer again to do post-deploy migrations. And then I was thinking QA has gone back, so it sounds like if Myra is doing the work to move QA up to release tools, is that correct? Like pulling it out of that deployer pipeline. So I'm thinking this might be correct then, in that what will happen is the coordinated pipeline will be running the QA, and then there's this finished staging. But it sounds like there might be some things in here at the finalized step we also need to pull out. Okay.
Yeah, so that finished staging probably is triggering again the deployer. So probably in the very beginning, we will have to split deployer for each environment in 3 sections. One is do up until the fleet,
Yep.
or including the fleet. I mean, we can leave
sure.
the fleet inside, right? So do the deployment.
Yep.
Up until the fleet. One is just run post-deployment migration.
Yep.
And the other one is complete the deployment. But the
whatever.
end goal is that we would not do prepare, post-deployment, complete, but we're going to do prepare, complete, and post-deployment will end up later on.
Yes, yeah, that's
because we are moving the things up.
Yeah, totally.
So that's why we split in three, right? Just we want to extract the post-deployment migration and be able to initialize a deployment and complete a deployment, whatever this means.
Sure. So I think this is the stage 4, which is the part I haven't fleshed out enough, because really I wanted to make sure we got stage 3 right. But mostly what I'm trying to capture is stage 3 is that just splitting things up, not necessarily moving things. So we just split, but keep things mostly looking the same for minimal disruption. And when we're confident the split has worked and we feel like it's in a good stage, then the stage 4 is we're going to actually start in that long coordinated pipeline. We might actually be starting to shift things around and work things in parallel. I still need to obviously flesh that out. We might do that at multiple stages. I'm not sure if we're just going to rearrange everything in one giant go, but that's probably something, in a few weeks, depending on where things are at, I'll probably have another kind of planning session on how we want to do that. It will depend on how this looks, like what we can and can't do, and what problems we find with the splitting, if any, on how we can actually start rearranging the pipeline. Myra's thinking, which I think mimics what we're kind of all thinking, is that removing the post-deploy migrations completely, I think is would be the ideal solution, but it is the most time. It's the most work, the most time. Number 2, which is where we just kind of have coordinated the release tools call deployer, as we mentioned, with just for deploy, calls it again for migrations, might call it again for QA, or QA might be moved up if that work is done, I think is the simplest way we can get what we need. And then Alessia, you do have there is another option, is we just bring release tools deploy tools into release tools as a submodule. You just hook that in, and then you're doing the same thing, except you're not calling deployer again. I'm personally neutral either way. I don't really know enough about the release tools and deploy tools code bases to make the call between 2 or 3. So I'm kind of happy with either one.
I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about this because I just it's something that I was not really well aware of, and maybe it's worth to make sure that everyone knows what we're talking about here. So there was made a decision at the beginning of deploy tooling. Sorry, deployer. That's part of the problem. Naming is part of the problem. Where deployer is the pipeline that runs deployment and is a project that contains a CI configuration. Only the CI configuration. What is actually running, so all the scripts, all the Ansible playbook, every tool that we wrote for the deployer is deploy tooling, which is another project that is baked as a submodule in the deployer. This has some complexity, like you just want to ship a fix, then you have to do 2 merge requests, get this merged and bumping the submodule and things like that. This is the decision was made a long time ago. But the point is that the script that we are running, so Ansible playbook, whatever, it's in a neutral place. It's an external repo that we can bake as a submodule also in release tools if we want. That's it, right? And it's an option. What I don't like about this option is that we should get a better way to automate version bumping, so that I don't want to end up doing 3 merge requests now instead of 2, right? So if we go that route, probably we just want to automate some way the version bumping. And there is also these things that the deployer is already configured with SSH access and everything, so that we can actually run Ansible on the deploy boxes and things like that. I don't know how much of this is a group level, how much of this is a project level. If release tools and deployer shares the parent group, because I'm not sure. And so the effort of syncing secrets, credentials, and everything may just be too much. I mean, in the other hand, in the other option 2, while this increased complexity of the deployer, which is already a complex piece of software, is just adding a couple of conditionals to specific jobs. We just say if this is a deployment and is triggered by release tools, we already have those conditionals. Don't run post-deployment migration. You just skip. And then you had another line where you say, if I'm the deployer, I'm triggering you and I'm providing this extra variables, which is I want post-deployment migration, just run only this. So maybe it's easier. I mean, it sounds easier. Then we will see the details when we start working on it, but yeah.
Don't we have ChatOps also using deploy tools for certain things?
ChatOps goes to deployer, straight to deployer. Okay. We have an issue to go. That's the reason why we have those conditionals. So if it's coming from the release tools, do this, do that. If it's coming from ChatOps, then do the old pipeline. So the one with everything is in there, because you are outside of the loop of regular deployment. When you deploy with ChatOps, either is a rollback, or we had auto deploy pipeline that is in a very bad state. We are not able to continue that one, what we need for some reason to continue the deployments. So maybe you have some kind of pipeline failure, which is a failure in the pipeline itself, not in the deployment, and you're ready to promote to production that package and you need it to be promoted, then you can just do ChatOps. And with ChatOps, you are just forcing the deployment of the environment.
I thought there's also this thing like deploy command, ChatOps command, right? Which is enabling you to run a certain command, which is taking care to run rolling through the fleet by, trimming down HA proxy and stuff, doing it on this node and then bring it up again. And I thought that maybe it's reusing the Ansible code from deploy tools, but I'm not sure about that. So I thought that there might be more dependencies to release to deploy tools anyway. So it's kind of good to have it in a separate repo and then being used from different pipelines, different tools and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I think the ChatOps is triggering the deployer, is not using the deploy tooling itself. I don't know why I think that it's the deployer is the only project using the deploy tooling as a submodule, but I'm not entirely sure. This is just my understanding. Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. If there was like a future where, we'd migrated Gitlab and prefix to Kubernetes and basically there's no VMs at all, do we even need deploy tools anymore? Like if there was
That's the problem. We have problems with migrations. That's right. So think about this. You have a full Kubernetes installation and you run through Helm and just say, deploy something. And I mean, right now it will not work. You will have downtimes. Gitlab may break because of versions incompatibility. There is so much problem around this. And that's the reason why we started discussing the operator as a team, long time ago. And we said, this is a distribution problem, not really a distribution problem. It's something like distribution is working on as well on a different schedule. So we just focused on the migration itself. But this is it's a good point, right? So the idea was that in the beginning, the deployer was supposed to be in kind of a end of life period. We just say is there because we still have VMs, but we don't want to support it for a longer time or anymore. Still, we may have options like running, for instance, the deploy box itself can be a one-off job in Kubernetes cluster, right? Because you just say, run me migration.
Container and this command, just rake db migrate or whatever it is.
So I would love to end up with something like that, but still we have thinking about is running on Kubernetes, right? But release is VMs.
Yeah. So I think in every environment, we still have a release VM just to keep things consistent.
No, I mean the release environment. We have an environment which is named release.
Right. Sorry.
Nice name, which is where we use only to deploy public packages. When we do a monthly release or a patch release, we deploy it to the release environment so that it get tracked and there is actually an instance that is running. I'm quite sure is a VM, maybe a single VM installation, because the purpose is just to test.
Yes.
Test the.
But
that one is going to be.
I think the difference is monthly releases are going to the pre-environment, I think, for installation. And
no, the RC goes to pre.
The RC, right. The RC is going.
RCs goes to pre.
Yeah, right. I remember.
Releases goes to release.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah. Welcome, Ahmad, to the nightmare.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I honestly can't. I mean, the big thing, once pages goes, we're still going to have Gitlab and prefix, and we'll probably have them for a time, like a long time, like a medium amount of time. I just don't see them happening overnight, kind of thing. Not like we've done the others. So it's kind of a moot point at the moment, anyway.
Yeah, but my goal, long-term goal, is to end up with still having a deployer. But a very small one, because we may end up with a situation where production environment and things like that are no longer part of that thing. So we just have, let's say, if pre is running there, if release is running there, fine. But this will kind of shrink the dimension of that thing quite a lot. And then we can discuss if it's really worth to keep maintaining those two things, right? Because maybe just if we use release just for tracking that the release was released, probably we can do this with Chef, because there's no real, I mean, we just pump the version on Chef and it happens to be deployed. It will happen, right? So we're just testing that. Actually,
next time Chef runs, it'll just install the package and that will run the migrations and everything else. Yeah.
Or we just end up moving everything again to Kubernetes because it's easier and is streamlined with everything else that we are doing, and we just trim down that environment. Sorry, Henry was speaking over you.
To Ansible, maybe. I mean,
the problem, I guess the question is,
yeah.
The question is, for some of those purposes, we might always need VMs, right? Like sometimes depends if we need to be validating Omnibus as well as Kubernetes, right? I'm not sure.
We run dev. Dev is on VM.
Yeah.
Ops is on VM. No, Ops is on Kubernetes?
No, Ops is VM. Those two are on VMs, but they're also potentially going to GitLab private, potentially. But I wouldn't hold any, that may or may not happen, but okay. So I think then just in wanting to wrap up at least what was on the agenda, Myra also wanted to make aware, and I think, we've already discussed this a little bit, but basically moving QA triggers to deploy tools, which I think makes perfect sense. I think hopefully it'll fit well in what we're doing here, because you could see in my initial notes for, I need to find a better way to do diagrams. So we can see here, for example, in staging, this is currently what it's like, right? Like if we want to pull this out, you've got this kind of hanging afterwards. So the fact that this is also getting pulled out, I think makes sense, and will make things easier, right? Like if this gets moved out, then this is and then we wrap up what is in the finalized step, then we can move this out easily. We can move what is in the finalized step, and then we're basically where we want, which is just at least one copy of deployer that does this part, and then maybe another that does the post-deploy migrations. I assume QA will just be called by release tools in general. I probably should.
QA will be run by release tools.
Release tools,
not from the deployer.
Yep, and that makes sense. And then, so that's good. Hopefully, that'll work well to make phase 3 of this kind of easy. Like to me, I'm going to rewrite this now that we kind of got a bit more of a solid plan. But But I think definitely that work will come into this. We want to identify what is in that finalized step of the deployer pipeline currently and see if that needs to be moved to release tools or easy, because it's kind of calling release tools. So maybe we can just move that into release tools. The QA, move to release tools. Migrations, move to release tools, keeping things in order, but it's just moving them out. And then once we're all ready and we're all happy with that, then we kind of really plan out what we want to do for stage 4, which is that is moving production Canary to be before staging. So it goes staging Canary, production Canary, staging, production. So it's a drastic change. And there's still questions about what parts we want to do in parallel and what we don't. But at least then we'll have everything isolated so we can move things around. Because at the moment, it's almost impossible to really do that because of the way we've got everything jammed into the deployer. But yeah, I'm thinking we just try and at least aim for this, just keeping it in deployer, just making coordinated pipeline, call deployer again, just with this one task to do migrations, even though it's a lot of work to just run a whole pipeline that does one task. I think it should be the simplest, and we can always change it later when we feel confident we can move post deploy migrations to wherever we choose for it to go, whether it's release tools or whether it's chat ops and something different. We can figure that out. And then we can just basically, it just drops out of deployer altogether eventually. And then deployer just shrinks a little bit. Cool. So I was just going to say, if anyone else had any thoughts, feelings, things they wanted to raise or anything. So I think for me, the action items or the big outcomes from this discussion is just getting more, a little bit of feedback about the work I've done so far, which of course I'll chase up on about. And to me, I think we've got a pretty solid consensus. I'll start trying to build that epic around what we want to do for stage 3 and that whole extraction of QA, extraction of post-deploy migrations, and obviously double check any other pieces we want to extract, and then kind of building that out. And then hopefully once that's kind of looking good and we feel like we've got a handle on that, I'll start kind of planning and strategizing around that last stage, which is that real, how do we redeploy, rearrange the pipeline. Cool. So if no one has anything else, as always, if anyone thinks of anything else or what have you, feel free to comment on the epic. It's all certainly a work in progress at the moment as we go and discover things. But yeah, it's all sounding, at least up until the end of stage 3, it's all sounding fairly straightforward at the moment, which is good. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much for your time. And I will hopefully talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day.